Beauty often leads us to the most precarious boundaries of perception. Beneath the mesmerizing landscapes that hold our gaze, sophisticated mechanisms lie in wait, seeking to deconstruct the subjectivity we have so resolutely defended. Upon the canvases of John William Waterhouse, power manifests as a vertical geometry that binds our vision, while temptation becomes a liquid state of the unconscious, slowly eroding the gravity of the ego. This is no mere reproduction of myth. It is a meditation on the sublime collapse and alienation that occurs within us when solid reason sinks beneath the surface of instinct. Following this aesthetic trajectory, we quietly trace the essence of existence hidden behind the veil of fascination. The act of Circe sitting upon her throne with her chin tilted upward is not a mere display of arrogance. It is a vertical architecture of authority, a manifestation of sovereign will designed to reify the other. The wine within the golden chalice she offers acts as a sacrilegious inversion of the Eucharist, an alchemical medium that strips the soul of its subjectivity. The moment the cup is accepted, the sailors lose their human form and are reduced to swine, the mere remnants of base instinct. The swine at the bottom of the frame are not merely animals, they are tragic witnesses to human fetishization, processed from subjects into flesh under the absolute weight of her power. The massive circular mirror behind her completes this sanctuary as a windowless monad. Instead of reflecting Circe's own image, the mirror projects Odysseus, the prey who has entered her magical range. This is a radical inversion of perspective, where the observer becomes the observed. The viewer, believing they are objectively observing the goddess, is, in truth, standing within her lens as a potential slave, captured in her circle of dominance. The violet petals scattered across the marble floor are not mere ornaments. They are a chilling mockery of the fragile life destined to wither at the feet of an eternal sovereign. If the power of Circe was a vertical compression, the nymphs rising from the forest pond represent a liquid temptation that seeps in horizontally. Here, the solid land of reason is slowly eroded by the humid water of instinct, a transition from the solid state of the ego to the liquid state of the unconscious. The angle at which Hylas bends his knee and leans toward the water is the visualization of a critical threshold, where the self loses its center of gravity and is pulled into the depths. The seven nymphs are not individuals, but fragmented personifications of different desires that exist within the human psyche. They do not attack, they simply gaze with a terrifying persistence, dissolving the singular subject known as Hylas into their realm of collective anonymity. The hand grasping Hylas's arm is not a physical force. It is a psychological magnetism of longing and fascination, a force that bends the will before it breaks the body. The intricate reflections on the water, the sodden moss, and the translucent skin of the nymphs coalesce into a haptic experience of clammy dread and a feverish chill. The viewer experiences a sensory paralysis, witnessing the very moment where the boundary between self and other vanishes beneath the shifting surface. This is an aesthetic hymn to the process of the self dissolving into the beautiful unknown, suggesting that the price of absolute beauty is the total loss of the self. When temptation sheds the disguise of fair skin and reveals the monstrous wings of a predator, the narrative evolves into a state of tragic sublimity. Bound to the mast, Ulysses embodies the primal struggle of man as being in the world, an entity caught between the pull of oblivion and the anchor of existence. He absorbs the lethal melody head-on, yet refuses destruction by lashing himself to the mast, the vertical axis of logos and reason. The frantic beating of the Sirens' wings creates a nervous dissonance, while the sailors, ears sealed with wax, row in blind obedience to the mechanical command of survival. Only Ulysses truly experiences the fatal vibration. He endures the agony of a shackled subject who longs to see but cannot reach, who yearns to answer but remains silenced. In a Schopenhauerian sense, this is the spark ignited when the will to live collides violently with the wall of suffering. Waterhouse argues through this dynamic composition that staring into the void until the very end is a far more heroic act of sublimity than the simple act of yielding to the siren call. It is the tragic price of consciousness, to know the beauty of the abyss, but to choose the pain of the rope. The stage of myth now shifts to the valley of absolute solitude, where the presence of the other has been utterly erased from the consciousness. Echo and Narcissus occupy the same frame, yet they exist in disjointed dimensions that can never intersect. Echo's gaze is a horizontal yearning directed toward a living presence, while Narcissus's gaze is bent vertically toward the void of his own shadow. Within this geometry of isolation, not a single thread of communication nor a moment of mutual recognition is permitted. For Narcissus, the water surface is not a mirror of self-discovery, but a liquid prison of self-confinement. He is mesmerized by the cold perfection of the imago, rather than the warm, breathing reality of Echo. This is the tragedy of a subject eternally trapped within Lacan's mirror stage, a state where one falls in love with a reflected alienation of the self. The voice of the other is reduced to a hollow echo, and the obsession with one's own image symbolizes the emotional paralysis and the freezing of the modern soul. Echo, gradually ossifying into rock, and Narcissus, slowly dissolving into the depths, create a chilling contrast of two opposing ends. One becomes a hollow vessel of sound, and the other a captive of a silent image. This stillness proves that at the end of a self-enclosed ego, where communication has been castrated, only a death-like stagnation remains. The beauty found here is a sterile one, a crystalline perfection that can only exist when the heart has ceased to beat for the world. At the heart of a primal forest, where vertical trunks stand as dense as the bars of a cage, a psychological enclosure is formed. The youth sleeping upon a leopard skin, a symbol of dormant Dionysian wildness, represents the most vulnerable state of humanity, when the sovereignty of reason has been surrendered to slumber. From a Freudian perspective, sleep is the interregnum where the vigilance of the ego dissolves, allowing the unconscious to emerge from the shadows. The nymph, leaning from the darkness of the thicket, casts a look that is both clandestine and invasive. Here, the hegemony of the gaze is completely subverted. The male figure, traditionally the observer, is reduced to a passive object of scrutiny. This tension, frozen just before the touch, captures the critical threshold where human intellect is about to be overtaken by the primal force of instinct. The stark, tactile dissonance between the coarse, primal grain of the leopard fur and the unearthly, luminous smoothness of the nymph's skin triggers a sudden sensory shudder. This hyper-realistic intensity transforms the visual into the visceral, as if the invisible breath of the unconscious were brushing against the viewer's own neck. It is a silent realization that the boundary between the civilized self and the untamed other is far more fragile than we dare to believe. After a chronicle of dominance, temptation and predation, we arrive at a secluded sea cave, the silent theatre of an eternal outsider. The mermaid holds a comb, a tool of civilization, using it in a solitary, private ritual of mimicry. Her silver scales are not ornaments, but the stigmata of a stranger, a biological boundary that forbids her entry into the world of land and logos. Her eyes are neither an act of seduction nor dominance. They are a manifestation of Sehnsucht, a profound longing for a world that can never be possessed, a melancholy born from the fundamental non-correspondence of being. The sharp contrast between the warmth of human flesh and the coldness of silver scales, between the softness of hair and the jagged cruelty of the rocks, visualizes the agony of the liminal being wandering forever between nature and culture. The cave acts as an unheimlich space, a sanctuary that protects her, yet simultaneously a cage that imprisons her within the depths of the chasm. The act of combing her hair in silence is not a preparation to be seen by the other, but a stoic ritual of enduring one's own alienation. Her sorrowful eyes pose a silent question to us all. Are we not also living as eternal strangers, nursing our own scales, while forever yearning for a world we can never truly reach?